At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to two young boys who have no one in the world to care for them. One day, a man buys both children and turns them into his slaves. From that moment, their lives become extremely difficult. The man treats them very badly and forces them to do all kinds of hard labor every day. Despite their harsh circumstances, the two boys always support and protect each other. They share the same dreams, the same hopes, and the same ambitions. As they grow older, both dream of becoming great generals one day. While working, they spend their time cutting and collecting wood. Using those pieces of wood, they create makeshift swords and begin practicing combat together. Year after year, they continue training side by side. Their goal is to become skilled warriors and eventually serve as soldiers. Over time, they become incredibly proficient with their wooden swords. One day, while the two friends are training, a general happens to pass by and witnesses their fight. Impressed by their abilities, he visits the man who owns them and says that the kingdom is searching throughout the land for talented soldiers. He explains that he wants to take one of the boys with him so he can receive proper military training and eventually join the kingdom's elite forces. However, there is only room for one boy. The boy named Lee feels happy about the opportunity and encourages his friend. He tells him that this is his chance to showcase his skills and fulfill their shared dream. Lee says that even if only one of them succeeds, their dream will still live on. That night, the two friends have one final sparring match together because they know they will be separated the next morning. Before leaving, Lee's friend promises him that he will train hard and become a great fighter. He vows that one day he will return so that both of their dreams can come true. After his friend's departure, Lee dedicates himself entirely to training. He climbs into the mountains and practices relentlessly. Gradually, his skills improve to an extraordinary level. Eventually, he becomes so strong that he can shatter stones using nothing but his wooden sword. One day, while Lee is resting inside his hut, his friend suddenly arrives. However, his condition is terrible. He is gravely wounded and on the verge of death. With his remaining strength, he tells Lee that the king's brother attempted to kill him. When the assassins came after the king, they mistakenly attacked him instead, believing he was the king himself. Before dying, Lee's friend hands him a map. He explains that the map will lead him to a village where he will find an army capable of training him to become an even greater warrior. After saying these words, Lee's friend dies. Determined to fulfill his friend's final wish, Lee immediately sets out for the village marked on the map. During his journey, a group of bandits blocks his path. Fortunately, all of his years of training finally prove useful. One by one, Lee defeats and kills every robber standing in his way. After overcoming them, he resumes his journey and eventually reaches the village his friend had described. There, he discovers a small hut. Inside the hut, he encounters the king himself. To Lee's shock, the king looks exactly like his deceased friend. Confused and surprised, Lee demands an explanation. The king reveals the truth. He explains that the general had purchased Lee's friend because he looked identical to the king. Since many enemies were plotting to assassinate him, the general wanted to use Lee's friend as a decoy to mislead those who wished him dead. Meanwhile, the same conspirators working alongside the king's brother continue searching for the king. They visit the man who had once owned Lee and his friend as slaves because they know the person they previously killed was not the real king, but merely his look-alike. Lee becomes furious after learning the truth. He believes the king sacrificed his friend to save his own life. Suddenly, the assassin who killed Lee's friend appears once again and launches another attack against the king. The assassin tries to manipulate Lee by telling him that his friend died because of the king. He insists that the king deceived him and deserves to die. However, Lee refuses to listen. Deep down, he knows that this assassin was only a tool and not the true reason behind his friend's death. Without hesitation, Lee attacks the assassin. A fierce battle follows. The two warriors clash relentlessly, exchanging countless blows. After an intense fight, Lee finally succeeds in killing the assassin. When the battle ends, he returns to the king. Even though the assassin is dead, Lee still carries anger in his heart. He continues to believe that the king is responsible for his friend's death. The king then explains his side of the story. He tells Lee that his friend willingly made a sacrifice for the sake of the entire kingdom. The king says that his survival was necessary because the kingdom's power and stability depended upon him. If he had died and the throne had fallen into the hands of his brother, a cruel and ruthless man, the entire kingdom would have suffered. The king then asks Li for help. He requests Li's assistance in building an army strong enough to defeat his brother and avenge the death of Li's friend. At the same time, the king's brother grows increasingly frustrated. Since he has failed to eliminate the king, he orders more soldiers to continue hunting him down. Later, while the king and Li are traveling through the jungle, another assassin suddenly attacks them using poisonous needles. Li immediately engages the attacker in combat. After a fierce struggle, he manages to kill the assassin. However, during the fight, one of the poisonous needles strikes Li as well. The poison causes him to collapse unconscious onto the ground. Fortunately, the king saves his life. He cares for Li and nurses him back to health until he fully recovers. Sometime later, a group of soldiers arrives. Initially, they are frightened when they encounter the king and Li. But soon they discover that these soldiers once served the general who purchased Li's friend. That general had been one of the king's most loyal supporters. The soldiers swear that they have never betrayed the king and pledge their loyalty once again. They promise to help him reclaim his throne and recover the precious royal stone that rightfully belongs to him. Meanwhile, the king's brother still has not succeeded in killing him. Nevertheless, he boldly declares himself the ruler of the entire kingdom in front of his army. This has been his objective all along. On the other hand, the king feels troubled because his own forces are far smaller than those of his brother. In their current state, they have no chance of winning a direct war. At this point, one of the king's generals speaks about a powerful mountain tribe that possesses a large army. He suggests seeking their support. The king agrees, and the group sets out on a dangerous journey through the mountains. Eventually, they reach the territory of the mountain tribe. However, the welcome they receive is far from friendly. The tribe's warriors immediately capture them and escort them before their leader. Standing before the tribal chief, the king explains everything that has happened. He tells the entire story of how his brother betrayed him, attempted to murder him, and tried to seize control of the kingdom through deception. And with that, the next chapter of their journey begins. However, the leader of the mountain tribe refuses to help the king at first. He reminds him that, in the past, the royal army had committed many injustices against the mountain tribe. Because of those painful memories, he has no reason to trust the kingdom. The king humbly apologizes for the mistakes and sins committed in the past. He sincerely expresses his regret and promises that things will be different in the future. Seeing the king's honesty and determination, the tribal leader finally agrees to help him. Then, when the leader removes the mask covering their face, everyone is surprised to discover that the leader of the mountain tribe is actually a young woman. She promises the king that her tribe will stand by his side and help him reclaim his throne. After that, they begin forming a strategy. According to the plan, Li will disguise himself as the king, while the Real king will wear a mask and secretly blend in with the warriors of the mountain tribe. Soon, they begin their journey toward the palace of the king's brother. When they arrive, the leader of the mountain tribe approaches the commander of the king's brother's army. She tells him that her tribe wishes to join the royal forces and serve under the kingdom. The commander is delighted to hear this. Believing that the mountain tribe has come to support them, he gladly allows the entire army to enter the kingdom. As a result, all of the tribal warriors are welcomed inside the palace grounds of the king's brother. However, everything is part of a carefully prepared plan. The moment the opportunity presents itself, the mountain tribe suddenly launches a surprise attack on the royal army. At the same time, the king, Li, and the loyal general are instructed to secretly leave the battlefield and continue toward the palace. Meanwhile, a massive battle erupts between the mountain tribe's warriors and the army of the king's brother. The mountain tribe possesses a huge and highly skilled fighting force. Their warriors are experienced in combat and fight with incredible courage. Because of this, the king's allies succeed in killing large numbers of enemy soldiers. On the other side, while traveling through a cave on his way to the palace, Li encounters a gigantic monster blocking his path. The creature is enormous and terrifying, but Li refuses to back down. Using his swordsmanship and years of training, he battles the monster and ultimately succeeds in killing it. After defeating the beast, Li continues forward and finally enters the royal palace along with his soldiers. Inside the palace, The king's brother is sitting comfortably upon his throne. Seeing Li arrive, he immediately summons his strongest partner, a powerful warrior known for his incredible combat abilities. The king's brother orders this warrior to fight Li. Without showing any fear, Li accepts the challenge. An intense sword fight begins between the two skilled fighters. Both warriors are masters of combat. Their blades clash repeatedly as they exchange attack after attack. Neither of them is willing to surrender. Since their fighting abilities are nearly equal, the battle becomes long and extremely difficult. However, after an exhausting struggle, Li finally gains the upper hand and kills the king's brother's powerful partner. The king's brother watches helplessly as his greatest warrior falls. The man who had always protected him is now dead. Fear immediately takes hold of him. Realizing that defeat is near, he attempts to escape from the palace. But before he can flee, the warriors of the mountain tribe surround the palace gates and block every possible route of escape. Now, nothing stands between the king and his revenge. It does not take long for the king to confront his brother. The battle ends quickly. In the very first exchange of attacks, the king defeats his brother and brings an end to his reign. Shortly afterward, another general arrives at the palace. He is the powerful general of a neighboring kingdom. After witnessing the aftermath of the conflict, he asks the king what the reason for this war was. The king explains everything. He tells the general that he fought only to reclaim his rightful throne from his brother and prevent it from being used for evil purposes. The king then shares his vision for the future. He asks the general to help unite all the kingdoms of Japan so that justice, peace, and stability can be established throughout the land. The neighboring general is impressed by the king's words and noble intentions. Hearing this, he agrees to support the king. With the war finally over, everyone celebrates their hard-earned victory. The surviving soldiers rejoice, and the kingdom begins looking toward a brighter future. The warriors of the mountain tribe also pledge their loyalty and promise to support the king forever. At the end of the story, the leader of the mountain tribe presents Li with a special sword as a symbol of bravery, honor, and respect. Armed with his new sword and the experience he has gained throughout his journey, Li sets out to pursue his dream of becoming a great general. He is now closer than ever to achieving the goal he and his childhood friend once shared. And with Li continuing his journey toward his destiny, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.